Thank you so much for everyone to come into the Substack Live. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about the Epstein, start with the Epstein files anyway. Obviously, today, Pam Bondi has basically said that there's not an Epstein list, there's not an Epstein file. So there's nothing to see here, which is like pretty interesting. Like, I found the whole thing really interesting because for years, um, yes, I can hear you. Perfect. Thanks, Justine. Um, because for years, all we heard was that the Epstein files are going to come out, and when they come out, they're going to reveal that all these Democrats and all these celebrities, liberal celebrities, are going to be found to be on the Epstein list. And the people that were saying this was Pam Bondi before Trump won the election, and also the FBI director, Kash Patel. So these people were obsessed with the Epstein files um, way before Trump was elected, and they all thought that once Trump was elected, they would get the Epstein files, and then suddenly there would be this flush of all these Democrats running for the hills because they were going to be named on there. And the MAGA cult also believed this as well. Hi, Alice. Thanks for joining. So they all believed all the people, the MAGA people, the base, um, Kash Patel, Pom Bondi, except one person who's been very quiet about the Epstein files for years and has never actually been super interested in the Epstein files is Donald Trump, which is really really like interesting to me because it's funny that the MAGA base have always been obsessed with the Epstein files, like for years, like for 8, 10 years. All the conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, they love talking about it, right? Joe Rogan would always talk about it. So it was something that MAGA was more obsessed with than I think liberals were. Um, and I think because of that, MAGA started thinking, well, liberals don't talk about Epstein as much, so therefore, they're kind of complicit in the subject. Um, but I did notice throughout the years that I remember when Trump's partner in crime, Maxwell, basically she got imprisoned, and the one of the reporters said to Donald Trump, on camera, "Have you heard that she's been found guilty?" And he just looked straight down the camera and he said, "I wish her well." Hi, Robin. Thanks for joining. We're talking about Epstein, and he just looked down the camera, and when they asked, and said, "I wish her well." Now, this is a very strange thing for someone like Donald Trump to say, because Donald Trump, if he doesn't like someone, right, he doesn't. Hi, Mark. He doesn't mince words about like what he thinks. So for him to say to Maxine, uh, "I wish you well," obviously there's something going on there. She obviously knows because he's socialized with them for years, right? They live together in similar area around Mar-a-Lago. They're all from New York. They all knew each other. They all socialized together, right? I don't know what what Trump's role is in it, but obviously he's connected to Epstein, right? But but for his base, right? This is the hilarious bit I find hilarious. For his base to be so obsessed about Epstein and yet vote for the guy who had the closest relationships to Epstein that just about any other leader, right? Is a very strange thing, and it just kind of proves why it's such a cult, right? Because they they thought that Trump, right? They thought that Trump was going to be the guy who was going to release the Epstein files, and there was get the Democrats. They thought he was the guy who had a close relationship with Epstein. This is such a weird thing, weird relationship that they had with Trump and Epstein. And if you look back years and years, like last year in 2024 during the election, um, I don't know many people realize this, but he was interviewed by Fox News last year, and he was basically asked by the Fox News reporter, "Are you going to release the MLK files, Martin Luther King?" He said, "Yep, no problems." "Are you going to release the JFK files?" Trump says, "Yeah, no problems." Then he says, "Are you going to release the Epstein files?" And he goes, suddenly he just sits down, So he's saying yes, yes to all the other files, right? Hi, Natasha, how are you? And he's saying yes, yes to all these other files, the MLK files, everything else. But when he got to when Donald Trump was asked about the Epstein files on Fox News, he started saying, well, I'm not so sure about that one. This is kind of what he said, basically his words. He said, because there's a lot of phony accusations in there, right? There's a lot of phony accusations in there. Now, why? Hi, and why? So we're talking about Epstein and Trump and why the files are being released, Natasha. So and basically, yeah, and so he's being interviewed and he's been asked these questions, and he's suddenly not sure about releasing. This was last year before the election, right? So even back then, he was, he wasn't interested in the Epstein files, right? But is his base is obsessed with the Epstein files. This is a very awkward situation for Trump, right? Because imagine you have the people who love you and adore him, because obviously Trump's base is basically a cult. Hi, Jaron, thanks for joining. They're basically a cult, right? And then to have them like just obsessed with this subject, and I guarantee you, Trump would be thinking, I wish my base were not obsessed with Epstein. I wish they were more obsessed with something else like MLK or JFK files and things like that. Something that had nothing to do with him. So it was always been very awkward for Trump to have this base who's obsessed with that, and it's always been strange to me that they would look at Trump as being the person who was going to expose Epstein. The guy who once said about Epstein years ago, Jeffrey is a terrific guy and loves to have a good time. And he sure does love women on the younger side. So he actually said he does like women. So he already knew years ago that Epstein liked women. He didn't say like children or anything, but still, he must have known something to say women on the younger side, right? So he's got this long relationship with Epstein. He's always tried to not engage in the subject. Whenever he's been asked about it, he tries to run away from it. He didn't want to release the files, all this sort of stuff. Pam Bondi, and this is the hilarious bit about the Trump cult, right? Over the last week or so, there have been some people on the right, like online influencers on Twitter and that sort of thing, who have criticized Trump like directly, but the vast majority of them are saying Pam Bondi should resign, right? Kash Patel should resign because Kash Patel went on Joe Rogan and said that Epstein didn't kill himself. No, sorry, that he did kill himself. Yeah, and of course they all believe that he didn't kill himself, right? So because they now now both Kash Patel and Pam Bondi before the election were very much into the whole once we get into power we're going to release it. Now they're basically just acting like there's nothing to see here. So it's like they've completely gone back. So their base, who are obsessed with this, are like really upset at Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. But the one person they're not that upset about is Trump, which is hilarious. Like, how is it possible? Like, they will blame everybody except for the guy who partied with Epstein for like decades. So that's just, so it's everyone else's fault. It's Pam Bondi's fault, even though Pam Bondi had nothing to do with Epstein. There's no like there's no like history of her hanging out with like Epstein, as far as I know. Kash Patel the same, but there is a massive history with their boss hanging out with Donald Trump for decades. So if they're going to be angry at anyone, they should be angry at Trump because obviously when Pam Bondi says there's nothing to see here, that's obviously coming from Trump. Trump's not coming out and disputing what she's saying. Trump's not coming out and saying Pam shouldn't have said that, right? When Kash Patel went on Joe Rogan and said that, he did kill himself. Hi, Jackie. Talking about Epstein. And when he went on Kash Patel, went on Joe Rogan and said, oh, he did kill himself, which is a surprise to Joe Rogan because he's always been like, he didn't kill himself. I have no idea what happened, but this doesn't fit the narrative of the MAGA base, right? But again, they blame Kash Patel and they say that Kash Patel, right, and Pam Bondi have been compromised. But Donald Trump is just left alone. He's unscathed by a lot of these people. Like, how is it possible? How is it possible that they pick the people around him who had no relationship to Epstein and leave the guy who was like partying with this guy for years, right? Right. And actually, in fact, Epstein called him on one of the Epstein tapes, called Trump one of his closest friends, and he gets away with it. So again, it is definitely a cult. You can't pretend like it isn't a cult when you have all that information. I went on Twitter today. It was just hilarious because there were people on there going, the only person these are Trump supporters. The only person thanks for the love hearts. The only person I trust is what they're saying on Twitter is Trump. So, like, he's the only person they trust. They don't trust Pam Bondi. They don't trust Kash Patel, but they trust Trump, right? Even though Trump isn't like disputing what they're saying. So they're like really confused, and it's quite fun to watch. If you have a bit of spare time, I if you have a bit of spare time, I do recommend it. Robin, hi Robin. Pam Bondi was Florida's Attorney General. She knows a lot. Coincidentally, Trump donated to her campaign. The dirt runs deep with that bunch. Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. I know, but the thing is, hi Heather, and the thing is that um, it's just so weird how they let that all the blame gets put onto Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, but Trump gets away with it. It's hilarious. It's like we could wake up tomorrow morning and there could be literally a video of Trump at Epstein Island, right, with children, whatever it is, and they would still not believe it. Like, it's like there's nothing they can do. So all over Twitter today, all of them were saying the only person I trust is Trump when it comes to the Epstein files. So let's wait and find out what he says. And they just ignore all the other things that he said in the past about he's not sure about releasing it because there might be phony accusations in there. And I wonder when Trump says he's not sure about releasing the Epstein files because he thinks there's a lot of phony accusations in there. I wonder who he's thinking about. Like, I wonder who these phony accusations were against, right? I mean, it could be him, but it could also be people in his orbit, people around him, right? And look, if there's Democrats in there, then get them as well. I don't care. Like, it's not like this is the difference between the Democrats and the MAGA people, right? I think most Democrats, if someone was in the Epstein list and they did something wrong, we would be okay. Well, that person should something should happen to that person. That person should go to jail or get arrested or whatever, right? But with Trump, with the MAGA movement, it doesn't matter what evidence there is. They're still going to think that he's innocent, right? They're always going to think that he's innocent. So that's the difference. Like when Andrew Cuomo, the mayor of New York, was caught, doing some stuff, most liberals didn't stick up for him and say, hey, he's innocent. He's innocent, right? When Eric Adams got done with corruption, it was actually Donald Trump who stuck up for him, right? So of course Donald Trump stuck up for Eric Adams because he loves people who get done for corruption because, of course, he's corrupt. And that's the one thing about Donald Trump, right? He will reach across the aisle and help a Democrat if they get done for corruption, right? Because that's something that he can, that's kind of like a bonding thing for him. It's like if Eric Adams is done for corruption, then that's something that he can relate to. But one of the other things I want to talk about as well was how during that Epstein interview, not the Epstein interview, Donald Trump being interviewed on Fox News last year. During that interview where he basically said he wasn't sure about releasing the Epstein files, and before then he said the MLK files. If you watch the original interview, Fox News cuts it off when he says yes to the Epstein files before he backtracks on it and says, "I'm not sure about that one. There's phony." So they actually cut it out in that interview, and they only released it after some whistleblower inside Fox News showed the full, and then they showed the full amount, right? So basically, Fox News edited out the bit that made Trump, right, look like he wasn't sure about releasing the Epstein files. Hi, Kimmy. Hi, Zilton. And so what's interesting about that is that Donald Trump is suing 60 Minutes, right? Paramount, which is like the parent company, Paramount, and he's sued them, and they basically paid him $16 million, right? hi Joe, hi Kimmy, um, what's up? Yeah, and basically paid Donald Trump $16 million. So see, they basically paid him $16 million because last year Kamala Harris was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and they slightly edited the interview. I mean, I have seen the before interview and the after interview for the Kamala Harris one, and there's almost no difference. Like it's like there's a couple of and has. So they just edited it to make it quicker. That's crazy. I know. And so they just edited a small amount, right? Just to get rid of the arms has because they've only got a short amount of time to do the interview, right? So there was nothing taken out that she said, right? So it was really, and it was something that all news organizations do because it's not like a podcast where it goes for 3 hours. They've only got a short period of time, so they want to get to the point, right? Now, Donald Trump sued them because they edited it and said that that could have lost him the election, right? That was phony, all that stuff, right? Just editing out ums and ahs, right? So basically, he sues, and then they capitulate and say, yes, I'll give you $16 million. Now, there is not a chance in hell that Donald Trump would have won that if it had gone to court. Didn't go to court, right? They were right. But the reason is because at Paramount, one of the CEOs wants to sell the business to a company called Skydance, right? And to successfully sell a business, you have to go through the government, right? And it has to go through Donald Trump. So, but Donald Trump can stop that deal from going through, right? So there's no doubt about it. He basically blackmailed them. He basically said, um, you know, you got to pay the $16 million. Now the good thing is that CBS, part of the deal was they wouldn't come out and apologize, which I think was half decent, but still that's not enough. They didn't have to come out and say I'm sorry or anything like that, right? But the fact that they had to give him $16 million in the news, like when people read that, that feels like a win, right? That feels like a win to him, right? And as I said, the only reason he did it is because 60 Minutes, or the parent company Paramount, to sell to Skydance would have had to get government approval for that to happen. So Donald Trump is using the courts to go after the media, right? And he's using the courts to stop freedom of speech. But where it gets even worse is when I go back to the interview last year with Donald Trump and Fox News, where Fox News edited out the bit where he wasn't sure about releasing the Epstein files. Now, this is the hypocrisy, right? It's all about his ego, fortune, revenge. That's right, Kimmy. Yeah. And the thing is, Kimmy, though, um, if you compare the two, like you got two interviews last year before the election. You've got the Kamala Harris one and you've got the Donald Trump one on Fox News. Now, he's losing his mind and saying he could have lost the election because they edited out some, just some minor things, right? But Fox News did way worse. They deliberately edited out the bits about him talking about saying I'm not sure if I'm going to release the Epstein files. Now imagine that, like as we said, Trump's base are obsessed with the Epstein files, right? So for him to be saying on TV on Fox News that he's not sure about releasing it, right? And then Fox News editing that out, that's a way bigger deal. That is a deliberate thing. That's not just to cut. That's not just to cut time, right? That's a deliberate editing because Fox News knows that by editing, had they left that in, his base and basically Fox News's audience wouldn't have been happy with that. Although, in my opinion, they didn't need to do that because Trump's base will just go along with anything he says. It's like a confession of sorts. Yeah, yeah. Yes, there is so many things in the last couple of years that Trump has done, right, about Epstein, that he's basically admitting this stuff out there. I have no idea what it is, but he's not talking about that the same way he talks about with the JFK files. He's like, yeah, let's release them. Let's not hold back. When it comes to Epstein, it's like, not sure about that one. Let's leave that one for the moment. So, so just the sheer hypocrisy where he sues for $16 million. over a ridiculous editing, which all news media do, which affected nobody, right? Nobody's going to go, you know what? I was going to vote for Kamala, but I noticed she said a couple of ums and ahs during that 60 minutes. So I'm now going to vote for Trump. Like, is that really, is that what he really thinks? Was that worth $16 million? Was there anyone out there who was going to change their mind about who they're going to vote for based on a couple of ums and ahs? According to Trump, there were. So I don't know anybody. If you're going to change your mind on who you vote for based on that, you probably shouldn't be allowed to vote. Personally, I don't think you should. But again, it's that cheap. Nobody's going to think that way. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, Kimmy, the thing about this is that I think that, he he gets away with so much, right? He gets away with so much lying, and he's basically, I've said this before, but he's basically normalized lying. And the fact that he can sue CBS for like $16 million, and then they pay for it, right? And then nothing really happens, and Fox News can get away with doing like just on purpose stuff, high vic stuff, and then nothing really happens, and the news just goes on, and the news goes on, and the reason is because most news organisations can't keep up with all the bullshit. There's just so much. It's like 30 times a day. There's constant stuff about that stuff. The constant, oh, Trump did this, Trump that. It's like he saturates the market, right, with so many lies and suing here and suing over there and all that stuff. It's incredible. Like if you look at what happened with the tragedy in Texas, with all those, with the flooding in Texas only a couple of days ago, and it was like over 100 people died, right? And Trump, because it's a red state, Trump comes out and he says the right things. He says, we're going to do everything we can to help, and but it's a tragedy. But he doesn't blame anybody. Well, maybe later on, I think he tried to blame the Dems, right? But initially, he wasn't blaming anybody, right? He was just he was doing what standard like presidents do, right? Now, of course, when it came to the California bushfires, he just blamed everybody. He blamed Newsom. He blamed DEI. Like, apparently they found like there was a trans person who was working at one of the places, and they said it might have been like, it's just weird. They just blamed, like, there's a gay person there. Maybe it was their fault. So that's kind of what they mean by DEI. And then they found all these things to blame every little thing about the fires in California on a whole bunch of Democrats, right? But when it was in Texas, it's just, it's a natural disaster. Nobody can control it, right? And I was thinking, I don't remember. I mean, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm an Aussie, so maybe I missed it. But I don't remember Joe Biden in his 4 years, and I don't remember Barack Obama in his 8 years ever playing politics with a natural disaster. I remember Chris Christie when he was in New York. I think he was the governor of New York, and he gave Barack Obama this like big hug, and it was to do with a hurricane that hit there, right? So I think it was Sandy. Was it Sandy? I can't remember. But and then there was also Joe Biden when there was a cyclone in Florida, and he went there and he spoke to Ron DeSantis, and he basically said, "Look, is there anything I can do to help?" So I just, this idea that Trump would talk about California like that when they're going for a disaster is just, I think, unprecedented. I don't know any other president, whether they're centre left or centre right, who ever did anything like that. But he gets away with it. For some reason, he gets away with it. And I think it's because he's kind of graded on a curve. He's always been graded on a curve. He's like, it's almost like the media treat him like he's a toddler. He basically, just gets away with stuff that other people. If Joe Biden had ever said to Ron DeSantis in Florida after like a cyclone or hurricane, "Hi, Wendy, nice to see you." If Joe Biden had ever said that in Florida, right, about that, the news media would have lost their mind. They would have been, "Why is Joe Biden criticizing a natural disaster in Florida, right, while while it's still going, and blaming DeSantis for what while there's people dying and houses being whatever like that. People would have lost their minds. The New York Times, the Washington Post, they would have lost their minds that Joe Biden would ever say anything like that. But when Trump was criticizing California with the bushfires, it's like it's so normalized now. He's kind of in a way made it so it's almost impossible that he can say anything where anybody feels shocked anymore, right? And it's almost like a deliberate tactic to to just say crazy stuff all the time to the point where people just stop listening. It's like, so it's like when you have two children and one of your children always plays up, right? And the other child never plays up. Now, when the child who plays up all the time, right, does something good, you're like, oh my God, amazing. You did incredible. No. But when the child who does something who always is always good, right, does something, good all the time, you don't praise him as much because you're just used to it. And I feel like Trump is treated like that. He's treated like a toddler, right? Where he can do the bare minimum, right? The absolute bare minimum. And I'll give you an example. When we found out that Joe Biden had cancer, right? He posted. Now, I actually don't believe that Trump posted this because I've never, in the whole time I've seen Trump online, never seen him post anything like this. But Kimmy, he's the worst president we have ever had. His entire administration is horrible. Every single one of them, people are dying because of their ignorance, hatred. Yeah, I agree, Kimmy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like people are just so normalized to that stuff. And the weird thing is I can understand more people voting for it in 2016. I would never have voted for it, but there's a little bit more like nobody knew that much. People knew about him, but it was like he was new, right? And a lot of people just wanted to blow up the system. There are a lot of like people like, oh, let's just bring Trump in and blow up the system, right? And just see what happens, right? Even if I don't like Trump, mate, let's. But in 2024, you'd already had 4 years of Trump. That I don't understand why, as an Australian, as an Aussie, right? Um, as an Aussie, I don't understand. I can understand more 2016 because, first time, but second time, that to me, especially the second time, we'd already had January 6th, right? January 6th hadn't happened in 2016, so there wasn't that thing as well, right? You had him literally try to overthrow the government, right? Spent the next 4 years in court, had indictments for documents, the Jack Smith indictment for trying to overthrow the government. And the more he showed up in court, right? The more he showed up in court, the more indictments he got, the slightly more his ratings went up, like his polling went up, just slightly like that. And to me, and I've said this many times before, sorry if I'm saying it again, to me, that made me realize is that people weren't paying attention, right? They weren't, a lot of people these days do not pay attention, right, to politics. They're too busy on TikTok or streaming services. There's so many things to distract people now these days, right? That there used to be in the old days. Robin, they'll stick a needle in their eye just to own the libs. Yeah, exactly. Like they will literally do anything to own the libs, right? Like even this healthcare policy that I think this healthcare policy is probably going to affect um, is going to affect Trump supporters more than it will Democrats. But they'll go ahead with it because Trump said Trump said it's a good the big beautiful bill is a really good thing. It's a fantastic thing to do and all that sort of stuff. So again, it's just like it's this weird situation where a lot of Trump supporters are basically caught in this world where it doesn't matter what Trump says, doesn't matter what Trump does, he's always he's always going to win. The interesting thing the other day was, of course, Mandami from New York, who won there. Won the primary, not the actual race yet. But to me, like that's been a very interesting thing, the whole Mandami thing. Even if you don't agree with his policies, I think it's an interesting thing to think about the Democratic Party and how it's kind of the way people have reacted to him to winning that. Because it's kind of sort of shown. I love Mandani. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of showed that there are that once you take Trump away, right? Because what happens is a lot of people are so focused on Trump that they're not really thinking about the internals of the Democratic Party or centre left part of the party, the progressive wing or the centre left wing or the moderate wing of the Democratic Party, because people are so concentrated on Trump. You've then got a whole bunch of other people um, who used to be Republicans, right? Who used to be Republicans, people like Joe Walsh, who I've spoken to on Substack before, who is now voting for the Democrats, and a lot of those people, like as well, like who became Democrats. Now, it's not because they agree with all the policy of the Democrats. They probably don't agree with a lot of policies of Democrats, but they feel, and I agree with them, that Trump is an authoritarian and Trump wants to be king. Therefore, you have to overlook things you don't really you don't agree with when it's such a threat like Donald Trump. Now, I think what Mandani did when he got elected is it kind of gave us a little bit of an opening into what was actually if Trump wasn't there, right? If Trump wasn't there, what would be happening with these within these like center left progressive groups? Because what we're seeing is that um, he's copping a lot of backlash, right, within the Democratic establishment, right? And you don't have to agree with all his policies. Like I'll give you one of his policies I don't agree with, right? The grocery shop ones. Now, it's not that I don't agree that we should have cheaper grocery prices and all that, right? I do, but I have like as an Australian, um, and I've seen it tested in Australia. I've seen it tested in Europe, and it doesn't work. Like it now, he might make it work, right? He might actually make this work. And to be fair to Mandani, he did actually say he's going to do a pilot program first, like with four different grocery shops, and if it works, he'll expand it. If it doesn't work, he'll can it, which I thought was really smart because you shouldn't just do something because it sounds good. You want to make sure it's actually working. Um, but in terms of his other policies, like free buses, I think that's a great policy. Just to give you an understanding, where I live in Australia, right? We actually have that. We actually have, well, it's not free where I am in Brisbane, which is a city. We actually have 50 cents. So it's 50 cents to get on the bus or a train. So you can go all the way in the city, it's 50 cents, and come back 50 cents. So you basically pay $1 to go there and back. So, and it's made public transport a lot more popular. So I could definitely see that, right? That one working as long as he can get the money and things like that. Childcare, I think, is a great idea. We have that in Australia. We have childcare is such a great thing. Um, especially now we everything's more expensive. You can have both people working. Hi, Kathleen. So I do agree with a lot of Mandani's policies, not all of them, but I do agree that. But what I like about him is that he focused on cost of living, right? He didn't focus on the culture wars. He didn't focus on even Donald Trump. He focused on cost of living, and that's how he won. So if you look at all his TikTok videos, which is where he didn't win by going on legacy media. He did go on legacy media. There's nothing wrong with that. I think he should still do that. But he won by going on TikTok and streamings and all that sort of stuff. And he went on there by acting like a normal person. So he would go on the streets in New York and he'd interview people and he would ask them questions, right? So how often do you see politicians getting asked questions by just normal people on the street? And he would say stuff like he even did this one video where he said, "Who did you vote for at the last federal election?" And he did this compilation of all the people who voted for Trump, right? And what was interesting about that is that he said, "Oh, why did you vote for Trump?" And most of them said, "I don't like Trump, but economically I was hurting, and I took a gamble." They basically rolled the dice. They thought maybe because he was, he always, hi Betty, he always tries to make it out like he's this great businessman, even though all these casinos went broke and stuff like that. But they were desperate and they tried, right? And so he 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 basically spoke to those people. This is the great thing about Mandani, right? He did what a lot of Democrats don't do. If you look at how a lot of Democrats, like the 2024 election, more like Russian roulette. Yes, yeah. I agreed. I mean, I don't understand why they would do it, but to Mandani's credit, because I don't think I could do it, he was very sympathetic to those people, right? He was very sympathetic to those people, and I think he's he wants and what actually happened is he won a lot of those areas. A lot of those areas that voted for Trump in the federal election voted for Mandani, right? And they voted for him because he with Trump, yeah, yeah, and then they voted for him because he he was fixated on cost of living, and that's what it's affecting so many people. There are so many people, and I don't think that's just in America. I think it's in Australia, Europe at the moment, who are experiencing like cost of living problems. Rents are quite expensive in Australia. I think that's a bit of a problem in America. Home prices don't seem to be going down. And if you're a young person, it's very hard to break into the housing market these days. Um, and so I think a lot of those things resonated with a lot of the people. He's also young. He's like in his 30s. So he like ticked a lot of boxes. He's really charismatic. He's good looking. I think he's a good looking guy. He just ticks all the boxes, right? Charisma, intelligent, well spoken, all that stuff. So what, Jackie, think. So yeah, and what, what, um, but yeah, so he basically ticked off all these great boxes that a lot of people, right? Um, a lot of people were like, "Yeah, I want to vote for that." And on the other hand, you've got Andrew Cuomo, who's just running like a normal campaign. He's not really giving anything big. I think he did like a $25 minimum wage, or a minimum, but that was about it. I think Mandani did like $30 an hour to like up between now and 2030. But Andrew Cuomo is just, I think it was the comparison between the two, right? When you saw them on, like, when they were debating, you saw this like young, articulate guy talking about cost of living. And then on the other hand, you had this older guy, which is fine, but he's like he sounded like he was from a past, not necessarily his age, but just the way he talked, right? The way he communicated, right? Um, from it's almost like we were witnessing a change of guard. You know what I mean? Like a new version of the new Democrats coming through in that moment when you see them all together like that in the debate. I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. I'm wondering if this is like an early stage of the new Democrats coming through, right? Because also you've got AOC who's doing really well. You've got Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is, I mean, I wish Bernie Sanders was younger because I'd love to see him run again. Um, but these people are the people that are getting a lot of the attention, right? And people like Chuck Schumer and that. And I'm not hating on Chuck Schumer or anything like that because I'm sure behind the scenes he's probably good at management stuff, like organizing stuff, behind the scenes and negotiating with other people. I'm sure he's really good at that stuff, right? But he's not great at messaging, right? He's not great at marketing. I am. He is. Um, yeah, and he's not great at all that stuff, and so it just he looks outdated. I'm starting to see the Democrats look very outdated, right? Um, in terms of marketing, messaging, all that sort of stuff, right? I'm talking about the sort of the more establishment side, and they're really going after Mandani in quite in a bigger way than I actually thought they would, right? Because you could say something like this, right? Let's just say you're Chuck Schumer or a centre left or a moderate in the Democratic Party, right? You this is what I don't get. You could say I don't agree with all of Mandani's policies, right? But what I do like about him is that he's focusing on everyday issues like cost of living, right? And that's something that in the Democrats we need to do more of, right? Um, that sort of thing, right? I don't agree with his views on on Israel, whatever it is. Yeah. Um, so all that sort of stuff. So I think I think from that point of view, I think that they instead of just attacking him so much, they could basically say some things they don't like about him, but also say some things they do like about him, right? And not completely try to like completely diss him in all that groups. I just think it's a bad move. I think it makes them look worse. Actually, I think it makes them look like kind of like dinosaurs. And you got this young guy. I think a good thing is for them to work together on that sort of thing. He's not going to come in and become a communist. This is ridiculous. This idea that he's going to come in and become like Che Guevara or anything like that. It's just insane. He will probably, to be honest with you, he will probably govern like a centre left progressive, right? Some of the stuff you won't be able to get through. Some he will, right? He's not going to it when you're like a mayor or a governor or a president, most of the times you can't just do whatever you want. You've got to work with other people within the system or like that. So they're just exaggerating what's going on. They're going too far, right? They're just yeah. And it's like it's just and they're shooting themselves in the foot, right? Because they're making themselves look worse than they make it look him, right? And so the more personal attacks they do against him, I think the better he looks, right? The more attacks they do against him, calling him a communist, the better he looks. So I think, in fact, they're doing him a favour, and they're actually doing themselves a disservice, because at the end of the day, the people that Chuck Schumer's talking to, they're not listening to Chuck Schumer, like they're not listening to Mandami. Mandami's base is not interested in what Chuck Schumer says on the cross. So it's a different type of audience. So I just think it's a really bad thing. Yeah, yeah. So I think they could have done a lot better than that. Anyway, it's I just wanted to do a short one today. Thank you so much for coming and listening to me. If you haven't subscribed before, please subscribe to me. I'm going to do another one in a couple of days. MAGA calling him a communist socialist made me laugh. Yeah, I know, Robin. Like it's just ridiculous. Like, and what actually, just before I go, what I found interesting is that when they actually caught him that, there were some people on the right, like Steve Bannon and other people like that, who actually stood up for him. And they don't stood up for him because they like him. They stood up for him because they know that Mandami, right, could be a threat, right? Because he does a lot of the things that MAGA pretend they do. MAGA pretend they're working class. MAGA pretend they care about working class people, but Mandami actually does. So he's a genuine threat to the MAGA movement, right? And a lot of the people in New York who voted for Trump ended up voting for him. So he has, so he can get a lot of the young people as well. Remember in 2024, Trump did well with the young people, right? He did well with a lot of those people. Now, I don't think Mandami could win a federal election. I don't think, I don't think so, because I think he would find it hard to win the Rust Belt states, right? But what someone like, say, Josh Shapiro or someone like that, centre left, who's probably going to end up becoming the nominee, someone like that, is they can take things from what Mandani did and put it into whatever they believe and use and do a similar thing. Yeah, because doing old politics is not going to work. You have to do it on everyday living experience, like cost of living, and you have to talk about and you have to go on platforms where people are. You have to meet people where they are, and people are not on Fox News, CNN, all that. There's nothing wrong with going on that shows. You should do that, but you should also explore other areas online and stuff like that, so you get a different audience. I know a lot of people, they think of TikTok, it's like, oh my God, so cringe, they're dancing, all that stuff. I get that. But if that's where a lot of people are and a lot of young people, a lot of progressives are, then you have to go there. You know what I mean? You have to go where the eyeballs are. Otherwise, you're just going to end up fighting a campaign that you might have won 10 years ago, but you're not going to win now because you're going on the wrong. You can do mainstream and do online. You can do, but I think doing both is good. You don't have to do one or the other, but you have to meet people where they are, right? And that's the only way I think you're going to, and that's going to be more the case in 3 or 4 years, right? At the next election, the midterms, the more we get, the more we go, the less mainstream becomes, and the more online they're going to have to do it, and the more the Democrats are going to have to rely on people like Mandani. It doesn't have to be Mandani; it could be like a centre-left version of Mandani or something like that. But they have to use similar marketing strategies, tactics. The fact of the matter is, someone like Chuck Schumer, even if he tried that, it wouldn't it wouldn't look authentic because that's not who he is, right? And that's fine. I'm not blaming him for that. He didn't grow up with that stuff. So, but yeah, you need to have people who look natural when they're doing it. And Mandani, he looks natural when he's doing it. He doesn't look like it's, if not contrived, he actually looks comfortable. And I think authenticity these days is something that comes across online more, because when you're on Fox News or CNN, it's like you've only got 2 minutes. So you can easily, you don't have to be that authentic. But when you're online, it's much harder not to be, if the people can see through you not being authentic. So that's just my thoughts. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for listening to me. I'll upload the video. Please subscribe to me, the Joe Thomas newsletter, if you haven't, and I'll do another one soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.